Do you know the story of Saul on the road to Damascus? It is the story on the road in between that would transform the life of a murderer into the greatest missionary of all time. How did it happen? It happened one day when Saul was getting ready to kill Christians, and God had had enough. And there was lightning. And Saul went blind. And he was blind for 3 days. Come back and we'll tell you the story of the most powerful transformation of anybody in the Bible, Saul of Tarsus.
Thoughts keep running through my head as I walk this road with nothing ahead. The sun beams down on my face as I walk this road that leads to amazing grace.
So here we are, Saul of Tarsus, who has got the pedigree, the power, the prestige. He's the top of the top. He's the Pharisee of Pharisees. He came from the tribe of Benjamin. He is a Roman citizen as well as a Jewish citizen. His name is Saul. His name is also Paul. And he is in power. And he killed Stephen, the first deacon. He held the coats as they killed Stephen. And as Stephen was dying, he looked up into heaven and he saw Jesus. And it drove Saul crazy. He wanted to kill more Christians. He was living in the dark. He thought he was in the light, but he was in the dark. He was going in the wrong direction, and Jesus had had enough. But Jesus loved his zeal, and he would transform that zeal into good. God can do all things through his strength and through his power. He can transform anybody. And he transformed Saul into Paul. How did he do it? For 3 days, after seeing that light on the road to Damascus, on the road in between, Saul did not eat or drink anything, and he was blinded for those 3 days. 3 days. What does that remind you of? And then on the third day, Jesus rose again from the dead? Absolutely. After the third day, this is what happened. There's a powerful story of a no-name person you probably never even heard of in the Bible that would transform Saul. You see, Saul was not saved on the road to Damascus. All he did was get blinded and be in the dark on the road to Damascus. It reminds us of this. We all have blind spots. If you think about your car, all the mirrors you've got, there's always still going to be blind spots, and there's going to be dark, and there's going to be light. And there's going to be visibility and invisibility. And you're going to have those parts of your life where you recognize that there are blind spots. What are your blind spots? For Saul, he thought he was doing the right thing, but he was going in the wrong direction. And Jesus loved him so much that he turned him around. What are the blind spots in your life? Is it pride or prejudice? Is it greed or malice or jealousy? What is it in your life that maybe you recognize as being darkness? God will take that darkness and turn it in to light. Stick around, we'll be right back.
At Rick Justice Automotive, you'll find the right vehicle at just the right price. We have new inventory of late model, low mileage cars, trucks, and SUVs arriving every week. Come see us today, and you'll see how we've been able to help your family and friends find the perfect vehicle. Financing and a 57-month, 57,000-mile warranty are available on every vehicle. For an awesome car buying experience, come to Rick Justice Automotive. We take pride in earning your business every day.
I'm here at ServPro with Lamar Arrington. And Lamar, this is a great name. It's about serving. Tell us about ServPro.
Tom, we do go out and serve people. We help people that are in really bad situations with either a fire or water damage. And our goal is to make it like it never even happened.
Well, that's what God does too. He comes into our very sin and moves it as far as the east is from the west, like it never even happened. This is Tom Sykes for another Hush in the Rush moment with Lamar Arrington on the road in between.
City Hall, of course, is a classic Beaux-Arts design. The original architect, P.J. Krause. And this came from the White City, which was produced in 1893 in Chicago, Illinois, which was the World's Fair at that time. And it's what spawned from 1893 till 1935 the construction of public edifices all over America in a classic style. And so this is one of them right here. All of the moldings, all of the pieces, the filigree and all that you see up top, approximately 65% of all of this was lost. It was so decayed when we got to it that this was all replaced by replicated work. But this is actual white terracotta. Boston Valley is one of the only two left in the country that does this kind of work, and the other one's not doing well. It's out in California, and they continue to supply most of the work for both modern and historical edifices. So one of the great joys in doing this building was the variety of people of such great talent that we got to work with. Nationwide. And
so, come in on the train.
Yeah, that's right.
Terracotta came in on the train?
No, it came in by 18-wheelers.
Okay.
But, you know.
All right, so this was decayed,
Yeah,
dark.
and it was covered with, 100 years of soot. I mean, you're talking about today's environment. I mean, a lot of this terracotta was pitted when you got up to it. And it was rotting behind because all of this was originally tied. The structural fabric behind it that tied everything together to the steel had just disappeared because it was iron that, because of water that penetrated into it over a long period of time, it just disintegrated and was gone. And the building was actually kind of imploded on itself. It was just there. But as we began to take out big pieces, the structural fabric behind it was gone. So we came back with stainless steel pieces that will be there for a long, long time, long after our ancestors have gone. So, and like the glass, you see the sunscreen here, which that's all out of iron, cast iron, and the glass that's in between it. And man, I mean, it took them 6 months to clean that and to get it replaced. The light fixtures we had to take down, and we had to have them cleaned and relamped and stored until towards the end of the job when they were reinstalled. All of the windows that you see are actually made of mahogany. Okay. That's right. And this is a national landmark building, so we had to follow the guidelines and directions of Archives and History, the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, which we did. And a man named Dick Hudgens, who is an architect in Selma, Alabama, preservation architect that I work with a lot, just finished redoing a Catholic church in Columbus with him. Dick is a very talented man that helped lead the way on the historic fabric side. And so these windows are, like I said, are made of mahogany, white painted on the outside, and then the stained and sealed wood on the inside.
Now let's go inside and take a look at that.
Okay, let's do that. Now, what's cool is as I stated earlier, in the late 40s, the City Meridian installed an elevator over here, and they tore out this portion of the building. And so we came back and did this. Well, my structural engineer, as he looked at how this was composed and placed together, this one is a duplicate of that, just an opposite mirror image. He didn't know how this was standing. We didn't have any, the drawings that existing drawings we had didn't really show. He couldn't figure it out. So this is actually, the structure underneath it is totally different from that, because he wasn't sure how that was standing, but it's been standing for about 100 years, so it's just fine.
I think we'll go with this side. Let's
And
take a
you
look
see
up
these
here.
columns?
Yeah, the columns.
Now, this is a unique story. These columns are not marble. It's called scagliola. And scagliola is a form of plaster that was created under the artisans who worked on the Medicis in Italy in the Renaissance. They were running out of the money to be able to afford marble. And so they went to the artisans of that time and they said, create me some marble that isn't marble. And they came up with scagliola plaster. Well, in today's world, those columns cost more than if they were made from marble.
They do.
They do, they do. That the public spaces of this community matter because it's representative of our people.
We are here at the Road in Between. I got my dear friend, BB Archer. BB, thank you for welcoming us into your home with Sally.
Absolutely.
Today, we are going to be talking about the root of relationships.
That's right.
You are a chef. You're not a cook, you are a chef. I claim you are a chef.
Yeah.
Tell us about how it all began.
Well, you know, I went to school in Lafayette, Louisiana in 1965, and it's the land of Cajuns. Mm-hmm. And when I first went to school down there, a great number of the people still spoke the Cajun language. And it's a wonderful world, a wonderful culture, you know, full of food and music and good times. And I had a friend of mine whose parents were rice farmers. And they had a few thousand acres out in the area of Crowley, Louisiana, which is southwest of Lafayette. And on the weekends, Mr. David had lots of sharecroppers that, worked the land. And on the weekends in the spring, all of their families and all of the David families would gather on Friday afternoons, all day Saturday night, and Sundays. And we would come over to Placide's parents' house and out in the area. And so when we would be driving up about 100 yards away, you could just smell the food.
Oh, yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
and you're
right.
And we would get there, and the people were doing a whole variety of things. The mamas and the grandmamas were shelling peas and vegetables and working on couillons and stews and étouffées and all sorts of things. And the men were playing horseshoes and bourrée and betting on everything. And we would come in and just soak up the culture and enjoy the people. And when I was growing up, my dad wasn't a hunter, so I played all sports, but I never hunted. So as my friends would be sitting around talking with all of them, because that's a big hunting world down there, duck and the whole bit. So while they were doing all that, I'd venture over to where the pots were and where the food was cooking.
Yeah.
I'd follow my nose, and smell it. And so I'd talk to them, and I'd ask how they did what they did, and they were very patient with me, very kind. And so I began to learn. And by the time I graduated and came back home, I was a bachelor, and so I thought I would start putting my own hand at trying out to learn how to cook food. Mm-hmm. And so, just like anybody else, I had a lot of failures, but you throw it out and you start over.
Well, I know through the years we've talked about this roux of relationships. Now, what is a roux?
Well, it's really just flour and oil, and that's all it is. And you can cook it to a golden brown, which is great for gravies and étouffées. And an étouffée is really just means like smothered in a gravy. And that's the base of the étouffée. That's the base of the gravy. That's the roux. And generally when you make gumbos, you make a roux. It's the base. It's what forms.
Well, it's like relationships, though.
That's right.
You cultivate relationships. You till the soil, you work it, you stir it. You stir those relationships, you build them, you grow together. And I know through your life that I've gotten to know you, you went through a time in your life where you almost passed away.
That's right.
And you learned a lot through that.
I did.
And in your time of waiting, you went from being really active to all of a sudden having to be homebound for a long time. And you learned a lot. And so I introduced you to a good friend of mine named Walter Brueggemann.
Oh boy.
During that time, because all you could do was sit home and read. And you read this book called The Land. And you and I have had great conversations about this theology of the metaphor of land. And it really has shaped our friendship because it's about land as gift, and it's a promise that God gives us, but it's also a challenge because once we get the land, for some strange reason, we begin to think we deserve the land. We own the land. It's ours, right? And it reminded me of when you almost died, you had to kind of do a reflection and say, life really is gift.
You learn and things change, and you see that, you come to realize it's you. Your dad can't always be there. Your best friend can't. You've got to jump in and do things yourself, and you have to experience all those things. Well, some things came easy and some things didn't. And it was like, I think most people, regardless of your background, there are good times, there are bad times, and there's a lot of in-between times, that road in between. Mm-hmm. And so, when illness came to me and it almost took my life, it was totally, I didn't have a clue. It was unsuspecting. I look back now in hindsight and go, there were maybe some clues if I had recognized it, but it was like I got hit by a 18-wheeler and just run over. And so what happens is when you are taking out of the so-called game of life, where you are a player to one degree or another, when you're no longer a player, it changes everything.
You're healthy again.
That's right.
You're robust. You're back. You're cooking.
Back. Right. Uh-huh.
You're celebrating life. Sally and you, great marriage, and everything's going well. But I know it's tempting to kind of lose memory. And part of Israel was they lost their memory. They got into the promised land and they forgot the Exodus.
That's right.
They forgot the manna, the daily manna, and the
40
quail
years
at night.
in the wilderness.
They forgot it. Generation died, and
right.
they began to think they owned it, right?
Right.
And then as a result, they became landless. And in fact, they were better landless than they were landed.
Yeah, isn't that funny? That sometimes we're at our best when we have less, mm-hmm. and when we have to struggle because we focus and we prioritize. And then, like you say, we often prove to be at our best when that happens. And then your whole perspective changes. And so when the next time goodness comes, and, goodness doesn't mean material wealth. What it means is a spirit and a root of relationship with your Lord and Savior and with your friends and your fellow Christians. Yeah. And anything else from this old world that comes about from it is lagniappe. That's the Cajuns' word for something a little extra, just a little bit extra.
Very good.
And so, it's all quite curious and mysterious, and yet, as your perspective changes, your heart does too, and that's where everything goes from.
Well, we're glad you're back.
Yeah, me too, bro.
Let's have some lagniappe.
Yeah, let's have some of this good food that we've been cooking here.
Vision, quality, experience. Glass Incorporated's expert glaziers can handle single window panes to entire high-rise buildings. Whether you need storefront windows, skylights, mirrors, or shower enclosures, no job is too big or too small. Glass Incorporated, your commercial and residential glass experts. Locations in Meridian, Orange Beach, and the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Welcome back to The Road in Between. So when we left off, Saul had been blinded. He had been blinded because of the big flash of light. And in the flash of the light, there was a voice, and the voice said, "Saul, Saul." And Saul said, "Who is it?" He said, "It's Jesus, whom you are persecuting." You see, Jesus said in his ministry, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you do it unto me." And Saul had persecuted all these Christians, all these little ones who were trying to find their way. And Jesus had to stop Saul in his tracks. And God will do that to us when we're going in the wrong direction, but it's for our own good. And so how did he do it? He blinded Saul in the light. It reminds us of Genesis 1. Let there be light, and it was good. And the light would become good because it transformed Saul into Paul. The word for Saul in Hebrew is desired. But in Paul, the word for Paul in Greek means little. He thought he was big, he thought he was great, but really in the scheme of things, he was very small in the kingdom of God until God got a hold of him. They said that Saul was actually 4.5 feet tall. I don't know about that, but that's the tradition. If you feel small in your life and you feel insignificant, believe me that God wants to use you in your life to bring good and hope. And He'll come into the dark and He'll bring His light. So this is how He did it. There was a man named Ananias. Ananias is somebody you probably don't even know about in the Bible, but he is critical to the transformation of Saul. You see, on the road in between, God brings somebody along our path to move us where God wants us to be. And for Saul, it was Ananias. How did it happen? In the story in Acts chapter 9, there's a vision that Ananias receives, and it's from God. And it says this, in Damascus there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, Ananias. He called him by name. Yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas. What a name, Judas, the one that betrayed Jesus. This is a different Judas, and that's where Saul was staying with when he was blinded. It said, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street. You see, Saul was very crooked. He was very corrupt. He was very misguided, and yet he's discovered on Straight Street. I think that's a very powerful image. And it says, and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. So here's what happened. While God is talking to Ananias, God is also giving a vision to Saul. At the very same time, God does that. God can do all things. He can speak to you, He can speak to me at the very split same time. And Ananias says, and I love what he says here, he says, Lord, I've heard many reports about this man and all the harm that he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. In other words, wait a minute, God, what are you calling me to? You want me to go talk to this murderous guy that's killing all of these Jews and these Christians? Are you sure? It's a tough call that Ananias had. And this is what God says to him. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, get up and go. This man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles, people who weren't Jewish, and their kings, and before the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. So there is an affirmation that Ananias receives. And I'm thankful that God does that, because poor Ananias, that's the last place he wanted to go. I mean, he was probably scared for his life. I mean, would you go knowing that you could be murdered and killed? Then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. That's a powerful story of a little man who would be transformative in the story of taking the greatest missionary of all time. You see, Saul was not transformed on the road in between, on the road to Damascus from Jerusalem, by the light. He was blinded by the light, but it was Ananias who was given the courage and the strength and the power to go to Saul and with courage say, I've been sent by God. I'm here to help you. Who is Ananias in your life? Who is somebody that might not be very significant to others, but has really been powerful in your story? Who's your Ananias? And maybe you're that Ananias for somebody who becomes great in the kingdom of God. Saul would go on and write most of the New Testament. His story would become so powerful. He was the one who wrote, love is patient, love is kind. How did he discover that? Because Jesus Christ came into his heart through the light, through the darkness, through his blind spots, and he became the greatest Christian of all time. You know that Saul would go on and become a church planter, and he would go on and speak before strangers and before kings and before all those in authority. And yet as he did that, he did it recognizing that he was nothing and Christ was everything. He said, I claim to know nothing except for Jesus Christ. He said, the power of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but for those of us who are being saved, it is the power of God. What he did was he took the Jewish story and he recognized that Jesus came to fulfill that story, and he became the great spokesman for the gospel. A long time ago, I interviewed John Grisham, and I said, John, who's your favorite person in the Bible? And he said, without a doubt, it's Saul. He says, if God can use Saul, God can use me. And this truly is a transformative story of how God can use anybody. He can take murderers. You remember Moses was a murderer. David was a murderer. Saul was a murderer. What does that tell us? It tells us that God can take our past and use it for God's glory. Here's the good news. As soon as Ananias went to Saul, he put his hands on the very part of Saul that was blinded. And in the darkness, he placed his hands there, and it said it was like scales falling off of the eyes of Saul. God will do that for you and for me. For anything that keeps us prideful or keeps that prejudice or that hatred, God will pull that back from us so that we can have a vision of how we are supposed to live. And so what happened next? Ananias said, you are invited into the kingdom of God. Jesus wants to use you for His glory. And immediately then, what happened? Ananias baptized Saul. And he took that water and he put it upon the head of Saul. And he received the power of the Holy Spirit. When you and I are baptized, it cleanses us, it renews us, gets all that old filth and dirtiness off. Let me tell you what, Saul was a new man. Saul was a new person, and you and I can become new again. David says in the book of Psalms, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. How did He do that? God brings somebody along our path to get us back on the road we need to be. So if you're on the road in between and you know that you're going down the wrong road, God will give us a GPS. He will reroute us. He'll exit us onto a ramp, and He will move us back to where He wants us to be so that God can use us. Have you ever experienced that in your life? Would you like that today? I invite you to follow Jesus Christ, to invite Him into your heart. If you ever experience a spiritual conversion, it usually might not be so dramatic. It might just be a whisper or a sense of God speaking to you, and it might be through your own voice. But God wants to call you home. He wants to love you, give you a new start, let you begin again. So as you remember this story, remember that you go nowhere by accident. Wherever you go, God is sending you. And God sent Ananias into the life of a murderous person, a villain of the early church. And because of Ananias, God used him. God had a purpose in him being there, and He'd given him the Holy Spirit to him. So who's the Ananias for you? And maybe you are the Ananias for somebody else. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you into the darkness and bring you light. Until next time, blessings to you on your road in between.